Hello! Welcome. Welcome. Sunday night, Monday morning, Monday afternoon. It's a time zone for you.
I was getting fitted for my tux when a random number called. Dude said, "Hey man, I think we should talk." I thought it was spam. But then he said her name. And his next sentence? She told me I was just a fling. But I didn't know she was engaged. That changed everything. My fiancée was living two lives, and I was about to end both. So there I was, standing in front of this massive three-way mirror at the fancy tux shop downtown, getting measured for what was supposed to be the biggest day of my life. Wedding was 3 weeks away, venue booked, flowers ordered, the whole 9 yards. Monica and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and everything seemed perfect. She worked as a marketing coordinator for some tech startup, traveled a lot for conferences and client meetings, but we made it work. The tailor was doing his thing with the measuring tape when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it because these days every other call is some scammer trying to sell you extended car warranty or whatever. But something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was nervous, shaky even. Guy sounded like he was my age, maybe a little older. He started with that weird opener about thinking we should talk, and yeah, my first instinct was to hang up. But then he said Monica's name. Not just her first name, but her full name, Monica Catherine Brennan. That got my attention real quick. What he said next made my blood run cold. This stranger on the phone was telling me that my fiancée had been seeing him for the past 6 months. He thought she was single, just some woman he met at a hotel bar in Chicago during a business trip. They'd been meeting up whenever she traveled. Sometimes he'd fly out to meet her in different cities. The guy was genuinely shocked when he found out she was engaged, said he saw her engagement photos on her Instagram when he finally looked her up properly. I stood there in that tux shop, half-dressed in expensive wool, listening to this man describe intimate details about the woman I was planning to marry. He knew about her scar on her shoulder from when she fell off her bike as a kid. He knew she always ordered her coffee with oat milk and extra cinnamon. He knew things that only someone close to her would know. The tailor kept trying to adjust my jacket, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire world was crashing down around me. I managed to mumble something about needing to take this call outside, stumbled out onto the sidewalk still wearing the half-fitted tux jacket. The guy's name was Connor, and he wasn't calling to be malicious. He was calling because he genuinely cared about Monica and felt terrible about the situation. He'd been trying to reach her for 2 days after discovering the truth, but she wasn't returning his calls. He found my number through some mutual connections on social media and decided he had to tell me what was going on. Connor sent me photos. Not inappropriate ones, just pictures of them together at restaurants, at some conference after party, walking through what looked like downtown Seattle. In every single photo, Monica looked happy, relaxed, like she was exactly where she wanted to be. These weren't pictures of someone having a meaningless fling. These were pictures of someone in a relationship. I asked Connor to meet me that evening at a coffee shop across town. I needed to see this guy face to face, needed to understand what the hell had been happening behind my back. The rest of that afternoon passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, kept replaying conversations with Monica, looking for signs I'd missed. All those business trips, all those late nights she claimed to be working, all those times she seemed distant when she came home. Meeting Connor was surreal. He was nothing like what I'd expected. Tall, clean-cut, worked in pharmaceutical sales. Seemed like a decent guy who'd gotten caught up in something he didn't fully understand. He showed me text messages between them, months of conversations that read like they were in a committed relationship. Monica had told him she lived alone, that she was focused on her career and not looking for anything serious, but their messages suggested otherwise. The most gut-wrenching part was reading how she talked about me. In her messages to Connor, I was just some guy she used to date who wouldn't leave her alone. She'd made me sound like a clingy ex-boyfriend rather than her fiancé. She'd even complained to Connor about having to attend a wedding with some persistent guy from her past, which I realized was probably my cousin's wedding 2 months ago, where she seemed oddly uncomfortable the entire time. Connor apologized about 50 times that night. He kept saying he never would have pursued anything if he'd known the truth. He'd started developing real feelings for her and was planning to ask her to be exclusive when he stumbled across our engagement announcement on social media. The poor guy looked devastated. But here's where things got really twisted. Connor mentioned that Monica had been talking about taking a promotion that would require her to relocate to Portland. She'd been excited about it, said it was exactly the fresh start she needed. This was news to me. Monica had never mentioned any promotion or any desire to move to Portland. In fact, just last week she'd been talking about where we should look for houses after the wedding. I went home that night and searched through Monica's things while she was at her yoga class. Found a second phone hidden in her dresser drawer. A phone I'd never seen before. It was locked, but I recognized Connor's number in the recent calls. There were dozens of calls and messages between them over the past few months. The phone also had dating apps installed, multiple profiles with photos I'd never seen her take. When Monica came home from yoga, I was sitting at our kitchen table with both phones in front of me. She walked in all cheerful, started telling me about her day, then stopped mid-sentence when she saw what was on the table. The color drained from her face, but she didn't say anything for the longest time. Just stared at those phones like they were explosive devices. What happened next was like watching someone I'd known for 4 years transform into a complete stranger. Monica sat down across from me, looked at those phones, then looked up at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, like she was running through different scenarios in her head. When she finally spoke, it wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was a question. She asked me how much I knew. Not whether I'd found out about Connor, not whether I was upset, but how much I knew. Like this was some kind of damage control situation rather than the complete destruction of our relationship. That's when I realized this wasn't just about one affair. This was bigger than Connor, bigger than some business trip hookup that got out of hand. I told her about the call, about meeting Connor, about finding the phone. Monica listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally like I was giving her a status report. When I finished, she was quiet for another long moment. Then she started talking. What she told me over the next hour changed everything I thought I knew about the woman I was planning to marry. Monica had been living a double life for over 2 years. Not just cheating, but maintaining an entirely separate existence. She had an apartment in Denver that I didn't know about, had been using it as a base for what she called her other commitments. She'd been seeing multiple men in different cities, guys she'd meet at conferences or through work connections. Each one thought they were in some kind of casual but exclusive relationship with her. But it got worse. Monica had been systematically lying to everyone in her life, including her own family. Her parents thought she'd broken up with me months ago and was dating someone named Brad in San Francisco. Her sister thought Monica was taking a break from serious relationships to focus on her career. Her work colleagues in different cities knew her by slightly different versions of her name and background. The Portland promotion was real, but it wasn't a promotion. Monica had been planning to disappear. She'd been slowly transferring money from our joint accounts, had already put deposits down on an apartment there, and was planning to leave right after our wedding. She was going to take the honeymoon money, the wedding gifts, everything we'd built together, and start over with a clean slate in a new city. I asked her why she didn't just break up with me if she wanted out. Her answer was chilling. She said breaking up would have been complicated, that I knew too many people in her life, that it was easier to just let me think everything was fine until she could make a clean exit. The wedding was supposed to be her grand finale, one last performance before disappearing entirely. Monica explained this like she was discussing a business strategy. No emotion, no remorse, just cold logic about how she'd been managing multiple relationships and identities. She even pulled out a notebook where she'd been keeping track of the different stories she'd told different people, like some kind of elaborate role-playing game. That's when I started wondering about other things. I asked her about her job, about all those business trips and conferences. Turns out she'd been lying about most of those too. Monica did work for a tech company, but she wasn't traveling nearly as much as she'd claimed. She'd been using fake business trips as cover for her other relationships, sometimes taking vacation days to spend long weekends with guys in different cities. The Denver apartment was her headquarters for this whole operation. She'd been renting it for 18 months, furnished it with stuff she claimed to have donated or thrown away when we moved in together. She'd been living there probably 1 or 2 weekends a month, maintaining it as her escape route if everything fell apart. I demanded to see the apartment. Monica tried to talk me out of it, said there was no point, that it would just make things worse. But I insisted. We drove there that night, about a 2-hour drive, hardly speaking the entire way. I kept looking at her in the passenger seat, trying to reconcile this person with the woman who'd been planning our wedding menu just last week. The apartment was like stepping into an alternate universe. Photos of Monica with people I'd never seen, decorations and furniture that reflected completely different tastes than what we had at home. There were men's clothes in the closet, different sizes, like she'd been keeping trophies from her various relationships. A calendar on the wall showed appointments and dates that corresponded with times she'd told me she was working late or traveling for business. But the most disturbing thing was finding another engagement ring in her jewelry box. Different style than the one I'd given her, clearly expensive. Monica saw me find it and just shrugged, said it was from someone named Jeremy in Minneapolis who'd proposed 6 months ago. She'd said yes to him too, was planning to figure out how to handle that situation later. I realized I'd been living with someone who was essentially a sociopath. Monica had been juggling multiple serious relationships, multiple identities, multiple life plans, all while acting like the perfect fiancée at home. She'd been planning our future while simultaneously planning to abandon it, accepting proposals from other men while wearing my ring. The scariest part was how good she was at it. For years together, and I'd never suspected anything. She remembered details about my life, my family, my work, maintained perfect consistency in her personality around me. If Connor hadn't called, I would have married her in 3 weeks and probably never found out about any of this. Standing in that apartment, looking at evidence of this elaborate deception, I asked Monica if she'd ever actually loved me. Her response was terrifying in its honesty. She said she'd loved different versions of herself, and I was part of one of those versions. But she'd grown tired of being that person and was ready to try being someone else. I thought finding out about Monica's double life was the worst thing that could happen, but I was wrong. When we got back from Denver, there was a car parked outside our house. Black sedan with tinted windows, looked like something from a government agency. 2 people in suits got out when they saw us pull into the driveway. They introduced themselves as federal agents. Not FBI, but something called Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They'd been investigating Monica for the past 3 months as part of a larger fraud case. Apparently, her web of deception went way beyond just cheating on multiple boyfriends. Monica had been running an elaborate financial scam using her various identities and relationships. She'd been convincing men to invest in fake business opportunities, getting them to transfer money into accounts she controlled. The Denver apartment, the travel, the lifestyle she was maintaining, it was all funded by money she'd stolen from guys who thought they were in relationships with her. The agents had been tracking financial transfers across multiple states, following a pattern of men who'd been convinced to invest in what Monica called ground floor opportunities in emerging tech markets. She'd been using her real background in marketing to make these fake investments sound legitimate, creating fake websites and documentation to support her stories. Connor wasn't just a guy she was cheating with. He'd transferred $35,000 to Monica over the past 4 months. Money he thought was going towards starting a consulting business they were planning to run together. Jeremy in Minneapolis had invested even more, nearly $60,000 for what he believed was their shared future in Portland. Monica had been playing these men against each other without them knowing. She'd tell Connor that she needed money for business expenses because her other investors were pulling out. She'd tell Jeremy that she needed bridge funding because her business partner was having financial difficulties. Each guy thought he was helping secure their shared future, not knowing about the others. But here's where it got really insane. The agents told us that Monica wasn't working alone. She was part of a larger network of women running similar operations across the country. They called it a romance fraud syndicate, where women would develop long-term relationships with targets, then systematically extract money from them using fake investment opportunities or manufactured emergencies. The syndicate had been operating for over 5 years, had defrauded hundreds of men out of millions of dollars. Monica was what they called a senior operator, someone who'd proven particularly effective at maintaining multiple long-term relationships while extracting maximum financial value from each target. I asked the agents how they'd found out about Monica. Turns out Jeremy in Minneapolis had gotten suspicious when Monica kept asking for more money, but couldn't provide clear documentation about their supposed business. He'd hired a private investigator who'd uncovered the other relationships and the pattern of financial transfers. Jeremy had contacted federal authorities when he realized the scope of what was happening. The agents wanted my cooperation in building their case against Monica and the larger syndicate. They'd been monitoring her communications, tracking her financial transactions, building a comprehensive picture of her operations. They needed someone with access to her personal life to help them understand the full extent of her activities. Monica sat through this entire conversation in our living room, listening to federal agents describe her criminal activities, and she showed absolutely no emotion. No surprise, no fear, no remorse. She asked a few procedural questions about the charges she was facing, like she was discussing a work project rather than the complete destruction of her life. The agents arrested Monica that night. As they were putting her in handcuffs, she turned to me and said something that still gives me chills. She told me I should feel honored that she'd kept me around as long as she had, that most of her targets only lasted 6 months before she'd extracted everything valuable from them and moved on. She said I'd been her anchor identity, the stable relationship she maintained to provide cover for her other activities. Having a long-term fiancé made her seem more trustworthy to her targets, more like someone who was serious about building a future rather than someone running a scam. After they took Monica away, the agents explained that I was also under investigation initially. They needed to determine whether I was part of the scheme or just another victim. My financial records showed that I'd actually been supporting Monica more than she'd been contributing to our shared expenses, which helped establish that I wasn't benefiting from her criminal activities. But they warned me that the investigation was far from over. Monica's arrest was just the beginning of a much larger operation to dismantle the entire syndicate. There would be trials, testimony, media attention. My relationship with Monica was going to become evidence in a federal criminal case. The agents also told me something that made my blood run cold. They'd identified at least 12 other men across 6 states who'd been involved with Monica over the past 2 years. Some of them had no idea they were part of a criminal scheme, thought they were just in failed relationships with someone who turned out to be commitment phobic. But others had been more deeply involved, had transferred significant amounts of money, had made major life changes based on promises Monica had made. A few had relocated to different cities, changed jobs, even ended other relationships because they thought they were building a future with her. The agents left me with a thick folder containing financial records, communications, and photographs documenting Monica's activities. They wanted me to review everything, identify any details that might help their investigation. Looking through that folder was like reading about a complete stranger who happened to share a house with me. Monica had been documenting her own criminal activities with meticulous detail. Photos with each target, records of money transfers, even recordings of phone conversations where she was manipulating these men into sending her money. She'd been treating the whole thing like a business, tracking her revenue from each relationship, setting goals for how much she wanted to extract from each target. The scariest part was realizing how close I'd come to becoming one of her victims. If she'd stayed in character a little longer, if the wedding had gone through as planned, she probably would have started asking me to invest in fake business opportunities too. The joint accounts she'd been slowly draining were probably just the beginning of what she had planned. The trial started 8 months later, but the real chaos began much sooner than that. Within a week of Monica's arrest, the story hit local news. Within a month, it was national news. Apparently, romance fraud syndicates were a bigger problem than most people realized, and Monica's case was one of the most extensive they'd uncovered. I became the face of the victims, the guy who'd almost married a federal criminal without knowing it. News crews camped outside my house. Reporters called constantly. Dating experts wanted to interview me about red flags I'd missed. The whole thing was humiliating, but I felt obligated to speak out because I knew there were other people out there who'd been victimized by Monica and her network. That's when things got really wild. After the news coverage started, men from all over the country began contacting authorities about similar experiences. Not just the 12 victims the federal agents had already identified, but dozens more who recognized Monica's photo or her methods from news reports. The scope of her operation was staggering. Monica had been active in at least 10 different cities, had maintained relationships with more than 30 men over the past 5 years, had stolen over $2 million through various schemes. She'd been living like a wealthy businesswoman while systematically destroying the finances and emotional well-being of men who thought they were in love with her. But here's where the story took another crazy turn. About 3 months before the trial, I got another phone call from an unknown number. This time it was a woman, said her name was Jennifer, and she wanted to meet with me about Monica. She claimed to be Monica's sister, which I knew was impossible because I'd met Monica's sister multiple times at family gatherings. Jennifer turned out to be another member of the syndicate. She'd been working with Monica for 2 years, running similar operations in different regions. She decided to cooperate with federal authorities after realizing that Monica had been planning to cut her out of their partnership and keep all the money for herself. Jennifer revealed that the syndicate was even more organized than investigators had realized. They had training materials, protocols for different types of targets, even psychological profiles to help them identify men who would be most susceptible to long-term financial manipulation. Monica had been one of their most successful operators, but she'd also been planning to go independent and steal their entire client list. The syndicate operated like a legitimate business. They had territories, revenue-sharing agreements, even performance bonuses for operators who exceeded their quotas. Monica had been earning over $300,000 a year through her various scams, money she'd been hiding in offshore accounts and investment portfolios. Jennifer showed me training materials that Monica had developed for new operators. Step-by-step guides for creating believable alternate identities, maintaining multiple relationships, identifying and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. Reading those materials was like discovering a manual for psychological warfare. The most disturbing revelation was that Monica had been planning to recruit me. Jennifer said Monica had been discussing ways to flip me from victim to accomplice, possibly by convincing me that we needed to run financial scams together to pay for our wedding and future. She'd been laying groundwork for this by occasionally mentioning money troubles at work, testing my willingness to consider questionable income sources. As the trial approached, more details emerged about Monica's background. Her entire identity was fabricated. The name I knew her by wasn't her real name. Her educational background was fake. Even her family members that I'd met over the years were actors she'd hired to maintain her cover story. The woman I'd been planning to marry literally didn't exist. Monica Catherine Brennan was a fictional character created to facilitate criminal activities. Her real name was something completely different, and she had a criminal history dating back over a decade. When the trial finally began, I had to testify about our relationship, about the financial irregularities I'd overlooked, about the warning signs I'd missed. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to prosecutors describe the scope of Monica's criminal enterprise, I felt like I was testifying about a complete stranger. Monica showed no remorse throughout the entire trial. She maintained that her relationships with various men were legitimate, that any money transfers were gifts or investments that had simply failed to work out. She claimed to be the victim of a conspiracy by bitter ex-boyfriends who couldn't accept that she'd moved on from them. But the evidence was overwhelming. Federal agents had financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from dozens of victims, and cooperation from multiple syndicate members. Monica was convicted on 47 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The other members of the syndicate received similar sentences. The entire network was dismantled, with authorities recovering about 60% of the stolen money through asset forfeiture. Most of the victims, including myself, recovered some of their losses, though the emotional damage was permanent. Connor, Jeremy, and the other men Monica had been simultaneously deceiving started a support group for romance fraud victims. We meet monthly, share our experiences, help newly identified victims understand what happened to them. It's strange bonding with people over the shared experience of being systematically deceived by the same person. I eventually started dating again, though it took years to trust my own judgment about relationships. Every new person I meet gets thoroughly vetted through social media, background checks, references from mutual friends. I probably come across as paranoid, but after living with a federal criminal for 4 years without suspecting anything, I figure some paranoia is justified. The wedding venue, the caterer, the florist, they all refused to refund our deposits initially, claiming that criminal activity wasn't covered under their cancellation policies. Eventually, most of them worked with me once the media attention made their positions look bad. The engagement ring was seized as evidence and never returned. Monica is currently serving her sentence at a federal correctional facility in Texas. She's appealed her conviction twice. Both appeals were denied. She's eligible for parole in 2032, assuming she serves her full sentence with good behavior. I occasionally get letters from other victims who've seen news coverage about the case. Men who were involved with Monica years before I met her. Guys who thought they were just unlucky in love until they saw her face on the news. The psychological damage she inflicted extends far beyond the money she stole. Sometimes I wonder if anything about our relationship was real. Did she ever actually care about me? Or was I just a particularly long-term mark who provided useful cover for her other activities? The federal agents said my case was unusual because most of her relationships were much shorter, designed for quick financial extraction rather than long-term deception. I think the truth is that Monica was so deep into her various identities that she probably lost track of what was real and what was performance. She'd been living as different people for so long that maybe she didn't know who she actually was anymore. Or maybe she was just a sociopath who enjoyed the challenge of maintaining multiple deceptions simultaneously. Either way, I learned that you can live with someone for years and not actually know them at all. That the person sleeping next to you every night might be a complete fabrication. That love and trust, no matter how deep they feel, can be tools that other people use to destroy your life. The experience changed how I think about relationships, about trust, about the stories people tell about themselves. I'm more skeptical now, more careful, probably less willing to be vulnerable with new people. But I'm also more appreciative of genuine connections when I find them. Most importantly, I learned that recovery is possible, that being victimized doesn't have to define you permanently, that even after discovering that years of your life were built on lies, you can still build something real and meaningful going forward. The Romance Fraud Support Group has become an unexpected source of genuine friendships. Men who understand what it's like to have your reality completely upended by someone you trusted. We look out for each other now, share dating experiences, provide perspective when someone seems too good to be true. Monica stole 4 years of my life and a significant amount of money, but she didn't steal my capacity to trust or love again. That recovery took time, therapy, and the support of people who understood what I'd been through, but it was possible. The last thing I'll say is this. If someone you're involved with has stories that don't quite add up, trust your instincts. If their phone habits seem secretive, if they're vague about their work or family, if they always seem to need money for opportunities that sound too good to be true, don't ignore those red flags. Romance fraud is more common than most people realize, And the perpetrators are often extremely sophisticated in their methods. They prey on people's desire for connection and love, then systematically exploit that vulnerability for financial gain. But there's help available for victims, and recovery is possible. The shame and embarrassment that comes with being deceived fades over time, especially when you realize that being victimized was not your fault. Monica is where she belongs now, and the rest of us are building better, more authentic lives without her. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.